I titled today's mind map, Imagination at the Same Time. So to further our last few Neville conversations, one from last Sunday and the previous Sunday, I would like to share some experiences. It seems more so now than ever before, others seem to show up and have the exact conversations with me, the exact same things I imagined them to say, as a result of revisions in mind, as we reflect upon the quote here, which I brought up in the last few videos. He says, "When I meet people tomorrow that today disappointed me, they will not tomorrow. For in me I have changed the very nature of that being. And having changed him, he bears witness tomorrow of the change that took place within me." So, when we relate with each other, we want to see it from the perspective of others play out the theater as to what is going on within us. This creates healthy relationships. And so the relationships play out, and then they say the same things of what we imagine. And when we have a conversation with them of how they arrive to those conclusions, the same conclusions that we have arrived within ourselves to, they will have their own story or their own reference experience of how they got to those conclusions. And a lot of times I find that they say to me, "You know, I feel like you really understand me." And I say, "I feel like you really understand me because this distinct way of thinking, you also seem to share this distinct way of thinking." And then they say things like, "You know, I used to think this way. I just, for whatever the reason, never allowed myself or never accepted myself to think this way." And I say, "You know, I share that commonality with you myself." Which brings me to this next quote here, in which he says, "Many persons, including myself, have observed events before they occurred. That is, before they occurred in this world of three dimensions. Since man can observe an event before it occurs in the three dimensions of space, life on earth must proceed according to plan. And this plan must exist elsewhere in another dimension and be slowly moving through our space, or we could say experience. If the occurring events were not in this world when they were observed, then to be perfectly logical, they must have been out of this world. So the question becomes, what are we imagining? Are we imagining how we really want to be, how we truly are? Or are we looking at the five sensory experience and based on interpretations in relation to the five sensory experience, which maybe we have formed in certain past experiences in our life, which seem to create fear, doubt, and indecision? The creation is happening within. Are we identifying with those thinking patterns? Or are we identifying with the true and resonant thinking patterns? In other words, are we going down an exploratory journey into the world within to discover what we truly love and then watch that express as others show up that reveal the same thing, although they might say it differently and they have different life experiences, but they're actually saying the same thing? Now, a belief that I have instilled in myself many years ago is that there are more people that are like me that I could possibly ever meet. Now, upon deeper reflection, I realized this was always the case, as we realized that people play out the theater, and it's revealed in the conversations as to what we are consciously or unconsciously saying I am to within ourselves. They're revealing these things. And so if we change to identifying with the thinking of how we truly desire to live, then how does it play out? Well, what I found is that it plays out in the same way that it has always played out. People show up to play the theater. They say the same things. They interact with me in the same regard. And perhaps this is one of the reasons why this idea made it into the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey, a classic book in personal development, in which he said, "Seek first to understand, then to be understood." So what we want is to understand others playing out the theater within ourselves, our own thinking patterns. We want to go beyond the five senses in regards to certain interpretations and recognize, or we could say precognize, the vision as reality, as Neville states. Precognition permeates all the scriptures of the world. And so he says, the habit of seeing only that which your senses permit renders us totally blind to what we otherwise could see. To cultivate the faculty of seeing the invisible, we should often deliberately disentangle our minds from the evidence of the senses and focus our attention on the invisible state, mentally feeling it and sensing it until it has all the distinctness of reality. Which is one of the reasons why I repeatedly recommend working with the Master Key System by Charles Haanel. Now, I've done a discussion on all the exercises that he provided, and I provided a number of exercises actually last week in Sunday's video of working with imagination and building it up, or we could say rekindling it to how it truly is, which is in harmony with the five sensory experience. As mentioned, I see the inner world as outer world because it is playing out the theater as a result of what I imagine, or we could say commit to in my mind's eye as the reality. And this can be five sensory experience in the mind's eye or a feeling, as we discussed ecstatic, the feeling of ecstatic in the last few videos. And so those exercises can be very helpful as I've been working to develop my vividness of imagination, or as mentioned, rekindle ourselves back to the vividness of imagination, because we know that children do this, simply committing to what we desire in imagination. And so I see the mind's eye as the true eye. Instead of looking around to see what others are doing, which a lot of it can be my own interpretations in relation to past identification of thinking process in relation to experience, I commit to what I see in my imagination as the reality in relation to what he refers to in this quote. He says, he's the one who fulfills the suggestion, and he's referring to Philippians 4:8. Brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. Now, I have a deep belief that people do want to represent their version of what is true, what is honest, what is pure, what is just, what is lovely, and what is of good report. So I can see in my imagination that which implies those things. A lot of times they communicate it to me. They show up and say, these are my goals, these are my visions, these are my definite chief aims. And I recognize through the feeling that that is what they truly desire. So I take on the responsibility then to see them as the person who has realized the vision in my mind's eye, realizing that past, present, and future is now in the mind's eye. The infinite world of imagination is now. And the degree of self-persuasion that they are that way, which is how they truly want to be, which is also how I truly want to see them, they reveal it to me in the conversations, in the behavior, in how we relate on the various things that we do, our business deals, our personal life, etc. And I find that we're actually stimulated to do this via our intuitive desires. As he says here, we rise to a higher level of consciousness, not because we have curbed our passions, but because we have cultivated our virtues. So I find that I'm able to rise up to a higher level of consciousness through the conscious use of imagination in relation to Philippians 4:8. And it is actually stimulated by desire. Desire of what I want to experience in my life, desires as to what I would like to see others experience, which is actually what they truly desire. And so he provides these 3 steps here, which we can apply what we're discussing here to a higher degree upon reflection. So he says, the first step in changing the future is desire. That is, define your objective. Know definitely what you want. So for me, it's representations of what I truly love. And what I notice is that people show up also communicating about what they love. And so I recognize the golden rule, which is do unto others as you wish done unto yourself. And I would want them to imagine me experiencing what I desire, what I truly love. And so I imagine them experiencing what they desire and what they truly love. And through the conversations that I have with them, I notice that they are committed to helping me in different shapes or form, or playing out the theater, we could say, in relation to my goals, my visions, my definite chief aims. And also, I find creative ways to help them or play out the theater in their lives in relation to their goals, their visions, their definite chief aims. And so to work with our imagination and imply this, he says, construct an event which you believe you would encounter following the fulfillment of your desire. An event which implies fulfillment of your desire. Something that will have the action of self-predominant. And so as we discussed in a few videos ago, I'll put a link in the description to it, in which we were reflecting upon some Vedic philosophy, Sat Chit Ananda, truth, consciousness, bliss, which represents Brahman, the absolute reality. This to me is symbolic to what he says, self-predominant. So I imagine what implies. And if for whatever the reason I'm not able to see what implies in my imagination, so then I capture the feeling of ecstatic. And to further emphasize ecstatic, watch the last few videos that I did on it, the Neville Goddard discussions. I'll put a link in the description to those videos. Because I know that what implies ecstatic, the feeling of ecstatic, will play itself out as a theatrical experience if for whatever the reason I don't imply a scene. I recognize that sometimes I know what it is, I can see it in my imagination, and sometimes I don't see it in my imagination, but I feel it. And so to me, they both imply the same thing, because then when I have the conversations with them, or when we work on our things together or do whatever together, they reveal it in the conversation, or I see it in the experience that it implied those things. Either the things I said to them in imagination, which implied, or the feeling which implied those things. And so he says, thirdly, immobilize the physical body and induce a condition akin to sleep. And as mentioned, one of the reasons why we work with this state akin to sleep is to allow ourselves to surrender to this vision realized by letting go of certain thinking patterns, overthinking, doubt, indecision, fear-based thinking, and so forth, for a moment as to what we saw in our imagination based on how we truly are, based on how they truly are, to be impressed upon the subconscious mind and the infinite world within, in which we may not know the ways, externalize itself as the experience of that imaginal scene in the five-sensory experience, or what implies based on the feeling in the five-sensory experience. And to do this, he says, lie on a bed or relax in a chair and imagine that you are sleepy. Then, with eyelids closed and your attention focused on the action you intend to experience in imagination, mentally feel yourself right into the proposed action, imagining all the while that you are actually performing the action here and now. You must always participate in the imaginary action, not merely standing back and looking on. So you see yourself in the true eye, your mind's eye, of how you actually are. And so to add, he says, but you must feel that you are actually performing the action. And so as a result of working with this information, power of the subconscious mind, autosuggestions, and other subconscious mind work, I recognize that what I see in my imagination is actually how I am, which is a representative of Sat Chit Ananda, visual representation of it, or the feeling of what implies. And Ananda means bliss in Sanskrit, which I relate over to the feeling of ecstatic. And so when I precognize, it feels right. The true I is accepted as fact, because it is fact in imagination, and it expresses itself as the five-sensory experience in relation to what he mentions here. He says, when I meet people tomorrow that today disappointed me, remember the today disappointed me, it's our own interpretations in relation to people. So on our journey to realizing our goals, our visions, our definite chief aims, these people only disappoint us based on our own thinking patterns in relation to. So again, when I meet people tomorrow that today disappointed me, or we could say seemingly disappointed me, they will not tomorrow, for in me, I have changed the very nature of that being. So I've changed myself in relation to. And having changed him, he bears witness tomorrow of the change that took place within me. Because as we mentioned here, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. And so when I have conversations with people and we get into deeper discussion, we realize that we all want the same things. What is true, what is honest, what is just, what is pure, what is lovely, and what is of good report. And perhaps on the surface, we have been identifying with, consciously or unconsciously saying I am too, certain thinking patterns that are not in harmony with what is true, honest, just, pure, and of good report. By letting go of those thinking patterns within ourselves, surrendering to the vision realized of what we see in our imagination in relation to what is true, honest, just, pure, and of good report, people show up in relation to our goals, our visions, our definite chief aims to play out that theater. And this expresses itself as harmonious relationships, friendships, in business, for example, harmonious relationships to a higher degree with clients, vendors, team members, etc. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's go ahead and conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. We can say, I recognize that my ability to see people for how they truly are is representative of how I see myself in imagination. Therefore, I find it easier each day to revise my day to imply that which is true, honest, just, pure, lovely, and of good rapport. Upon acceptance of the suggestion as fact, I'm able to see the theater playing out, for in me I have changed the very nature of that being. And having changed him, he bears witness tomorrow of the change that took place within me, in our conversations, in our behaviors, and in our relationships. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.